5 years in the sport, 15 podiums without a victory, and Lando Norris has finally done it. He's gotten a Grand Prix victory on merit and in quite the fashionable way in the Miami GP weekend. Lando Norris made the difference here, and while the McLaren was upgraded, his driving was phenomenal, and under pressure, he stayed in rhythm. This was the performance we were all looking for Lando after so many attempts at getting that P1 and so many things getting in the way. The man finally gets what he deserves, a nice Grand Prix victory that will definitely lift a lot of weight off of his shoulders. We learned a lot in this Miami GP weekend. There are many of talking points, and I got 10 top things that I want to go over for our Miami GP weekend. Before getting into the bigger part of the video, wanted to thank you guys for the support on the channel. It's amazing. You guys are genuinely the best community that I could ask for, with comments, with the likes. You guys are amazing, and thank you for supporting like you do. If you're new here, I'd love you to subscribe and join this amazing community, because that would really mean the world to me. But let's get started with the 10 things we learned from the Miami GP weekend. The sprint weekend has been very controversial since its introduction in 2021. We've had quite a few good races in the sprint, and those we can't complain about, but the actual format we had in 2023 was definitely not the right one. This new format we have with Parc Fermé being broken after the sprint and qualifying is actually quite amusing, because now we don't know what's going to happen in the race, and it's a bit more unpredictable. Teams can decide how they want to take this sprint approach. We see differences in the qualifying. We even saw some medium tires come out. It makes for a much more unpredictable and interesting Grand Prix weekend, considering we've gotten this Lando victory. We had a nice battle in China. We can definitely say the sprint weekend has improved a lot from its predecessor in 2023. Seems like Lewis is in the news articles every other week, whether it's about him being demotivated, not driving well, or what he's going to do in Ferrari. But this was one of those weekends where Lewis just looked like himself. He was, with one in the car, outdrove a car that's definitely much slower than the Red Bull, but was keeping pace with Perez and had an amazing race to show for. A P6 might not seem like the best result in the world, but when you drive like that, it is quite impressive, and he did an amazing job. We definitely saw a more motivated Lewis, asking about more power, just the way he was driving with those beautiful overtakes, especially the one he got on Yuki. It's hard to say that this driver is demotivated and he's canceled out for the season. Another driver we get in the news is Daniel Ricciardo. Whether he's good enough, whether he should still be in the sport, and what's been happening with him. Can he be at one with his car? And clearly this sprint weekend showed it. While we did get a P18 in qualifying and not the best race, in the sprint race, he was great, and he showed that he is still a great driver. You got to put him in the right environment, and his chassis change has shown that maybe there was something genuinely wrong. He's been good in China, now also here in Miami, and it seems like these race weekends are turning around for Daniel. Can we see him find even more form, and can we see a more consistent performance like we did in the sprint weekend? McLaren seem to be getting everything right in the upgrades. We constantly have weekends where we see Mercedes and Aston Martin and even Ferrari messing up with the upgrades and not actually upgrading but more downgrading. McLaren has been consistent. With the last 4 or 5 upgrade packages they have brought all the way since Austria, they've been moving up the pecking order. Now making themselves race winners in 2024 in a season where Red Bull has been so strong, and actually matching and being better in race pace shows that this team is really on it, and the concept that they have chosen is definitely the right one, and there is so much more pace to come from this car with many more upgrades coming. McLaren has been definitely the most impressive team so far this year. The Aston Martin team is very on and off. Now, this might have to do with them actually sharing a wind tunnel with Mercedes in the past, but also sharing a rear suspension that clearly might not be working on either car. Whether it's the tires going off, or in general not having the race pace because of certain downforce aspects, this Aston team has been quite on and off. Alonso has been able to pull the best out of the car, and he's really been pushing for this car to be better. But with big upgrades coming in Imola, we don't really know what to expect with this team. Will this be a huge upgrade to the car? They did say this is pretty much their base model. In Japan, upgrades were just to make the base of the car, and now they can actually proceed with upgrading and seeing what needs to be changed. But is there truth behind that? We've been seeing a very on and off team. They have improved a lot in qualifying, but Miami was quite a disastrous weekend. Logan Sargent has also been a big talking point this week, mainly because it's been speculation that Kimi Antonelli is going to take his seat. Now, while Logan hasn't had the greatest start this year, he will be keeping a seat. Lawrence Pareto has already talked to James Vowles. James Vowles has confirmed that Logan Sargent will be keeping a seat, and that Williams is looking and talking to about 4 to 5 different drivers. And while I do think Logan has some potential, it's hard to say that he can be anywhere near the level of Alex Albon, and it seems like his time in Williams is running out very quickly. Doesn't mean we're going to see him out in Imola. The Ferrari car can take a lot of good out of this weekend. Considering they were up in P2 and P3 in qualifying, Carlos was very fast, Leclerc looked outstanding out there as well. This car with no upgrades is competing this highly. It's going to be a very deadly team after some aggressive upgrades in Imola. They're great on their tire wear, they're also really good in high speed, and considering they were only about 2 seconds behind Max for the whole entire Grand Prix, as well as the sprint, there are many positives that Ferrari can pick out of this weekend. It's a car with a lot of upsides and very little downsides. It seems like downforce is the only thing they got to play with a little bit, and obviously upgrading the car, which has still yet to come, with the exception of a little wing patch added to the exhaust area in Australia. Carb was a team that came with a lot of expectations in the beginning of the season. We thought they were going to be up there with our current top 5, but we haven't seen that yet up until this weekend. Yuki Tsunoda finishing in P7 with Daniel Ricciardo also finishing in P4. It was quite the impressive run they had in this weekend. The car seems to be much better, and while it is still a bit draggy, the actual downforce levels and what they're able to do on the tires is impressive, and considering they have the Red Bull suspension, we were obviously expecting something like this to happen. The team is making constant upgrades, and one of the teams that's been bringing the most upgrades to the season so far. We've seen a lot of floor upgrades and constant changes within the floor edges and parts towards the rear end of the car, which are constantly adding improvements. Daniel seems more now at home with the chassis change, and Yuki Tsunoda has been on it all season, with the exception of a tricky Chinese GP. If Daniel actually qualified better, we definitely could have seen both of them in the points and probably would have had a faster car than Aston Martin in this weekend, putting them in the top 5, even beating out a Mercedes and George Russell. The Haas team is much more consistent this year with their tricky little tactics, but we got to give their flowers where it's due. The team has made a much better race car, with Hülkenberg almost catching Ocon by the end of the race. It was very, very close, and a great result in the sprint. Now, while this might have to do with Magnussen holding up a train and doing quite a few dirty tricks to actually keep Lewis Hamilton behind, we got to commend what they're doing to get to these points. They're trying everything in their power, and while the FIA isn't punishing it with a drive-through penalty, they can go for these attempts. It seems like a new strategy that we have yet to see, and while it is a bit dirty, it should be talked about that Haas is much better than we've seen. They've been horrible in 22 and 23 when it comes to qualifying. They were great, but race pace, they were awful. And it's a much better car under Komatsu. Seems like a completely different team. Red Bull officially have competition between 2 other teams. Ferrari and McLaren are definitely on the tail of this RB20, and I think it's only going to consist throughout the whole entire season. We're 5 races in, and considering that upgrades have been very little on the Ferrari, and McLaren just brought some upgrades to catch Red Bull, with Red Bull also bringing upgrades, the teams are not far off, and we have genuinely a very fun Formula 1 2024 season ahead of us. I've talked about it before, but these are the seasons that the regulations are going to close up and teams can only be very specific with certain upgrades. Tire wear on the Ferrari is outstanding, the McLaren has great downforce levels, and the Red Bull overall is great, but it seems to have lost that high speed advantage it used to have. And while it does have a better car in slow speed, it's lost a little bit of its momentum, which has made it vulnerable now in 2024. Miami was not supposed to be a great weekend for McLaren, and they ended up actually turning around. Same thing with China. So this is a team to definitely look out for, and Ferrari's bringing an aggressive SF24 in our next Grand Prix. What are your thoughts on what we learned in the Miami GP weekend? It's been quite the interesting one and a lot of fun. I want to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. As always, you guys know I reply and love seeing the comments that you guys put down, so thank you again for watching the video. Please leave a like, subscribe, it'd mean the world, and peace.